So, today's review is going to focus on a game that's been out for a while, and chances are if you're a fan of the source material or the subject matter that this game's based on, you've already bought it, you've played it, you've beaten it, you've claimed all the achievements and all that jazz, so there's really no point in watching this or any review of this particular game, for those who haven't done any of the above. Here's a quick review of Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures. Available on a wide variety of download services and platforms, but the version I'm playing is off Steam for the PC. So if it isn't already obvious from the get-go, Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures, henceforth known as Nerd Adventures for the rest of this review, places you in control of the titular angry nerd, stuck in a video game that is supposedly shitty and his only means of escaping is to conquer 8 different worlds based on different themes. Now these 8 worlds can be traversed in any order by way of stage select, and clearing all 8 stages will unlock a final stage inspired by rainbows and stuff. Along the way, the nerd will come across his other 3 friends, who are also stuck into this video game and will subsequently join him on his quest. Each of the 4 characters have different skills and abilities that can be useful in your quest to escape this supposedly shitty game. You have the nerd himself, who can shoot in 8 different directions, and can also equip himself with a super scope kind of weapon that lasts about as long as you don't get hit. He's your basic player. There's Guitar Guy, otherwise known as the skeletal remains of musicians Kyle Justin, who can shoot sound waves that pass through walls, much like the wave beam from the older Metroid titles. There's Mike, otherwise known as Elmo's Bitch, who is armed with a laser sword that does pretty much fuck all, but he can scan for hidden blocks that he can destroy. He's also the highest jumper in the game. And then there's the Bullshit Man, otherwise known as Shit Nerd, who has a double jump ability, and that's all I really use him for. His shot, while powerful, is slow, and the guy's a bit of a slug in terms of movement. Now here's the problem with the nerd, and the underlying truth to the caricature that most people would rather not admit, and if you do bring this point up, you would be branded a hater, and because, you know, haters are gonna hate, and wankers are gonna wank. But you see, the nerd is a bit of a moron. A fucking moron, if you will. This game is supposed to be shitty, or whatever, and yet, Nerd Adventures is actually a rather satisfying romp that harkens to the days of video games back when they were overly difficult affairs that could eventually be conquered through repeated playthroughs and proper memorization. For all intents and purposes, this is indeed a difficult game that ranks up there with the most challenging games of yesteryear, and indeed can be challenged eventually through memorization and repeated playthroughs. But the default difficulty settings gives you more than your fair share of chances to conquer them, granting multiple lives, unlimited continues, and the ability to save your progress. Only one save per game, of course. Old school difficulty is the sole exception. Limited lives, continues, no saving. Good for those who care for that sort of thing. And then you have the easy mode, which gives you more hit points. The nerd himself likes to play his own game on easy mode. Make of that what you will. And when you beat the game, you'll unlock other difficulty settings that will no doubt challenge even the most expert gamers. Control is pretty spot on for the most part. Game can be played with either the keyboard or a gamepad such as the Xbox 360 wireless controller for Windows, which I'm using to play the game. You'd be best served using a gamepad because controls are much better than on a keyboard, although you can customize your control scheme and button mapping if desired, so that's a good thing. In either case though, it's definitely better played with a gamepad. It just feels much more natural, especially for a game that is a tribute to the old retro style of platforming video games. Nerd Adventures takes on the visual stylings of an old 8-bit NES video game, except with more colors, parallax scrolling, and special effects that would normally be impossible on the old hardware. And for the most part, Nerd Adventures looks and runs pretty smooth for the most part. That didn't sound redundant at all. With the 10 worlds in the game, including the introductory level and the final level and the 8 stages in between, each have their own identities, gimmicks, and whatnots. So there's quite an abundance of visual variety on display here, but they all follow the same overall art style and it all fits together. Every so often the nerd will chime in and shoot out a hilarious quip regarding his surroundings, in text form of course. Each time you die, there's another nerd quote of sorts saying what he would rather do to play this game. It's not a bad thing for the most part, it adds to the atmosphere such as it is. Although it does get tiresome after a while, and quite honestly, the quips aren't nearly as funny as some folks might make it out to be. But then again, that's just me. The opening cutscenes are okay. That's all I got. Okay. I like the soundtrack in Nerd Adventures. I like listening to chip music, especially when it's done well, and this is particularly exceptional chip music. Each world in Nerd Adventures has a specific musical theme, and each theme fits in with that particular world nicely. And it's nice to have a wide variety of music that isn't just some lazy remix of the Angry Nerd theme over and over again, although don't fret, that theme can be found here in healthy doses, on the title screen, and also a slight remix when fighting bosses. As for the sound effects, they also fit the retro stylings of the game. They sound decent. That's all I got. Now look, here's the deal. If you like video games and you're a die-hard nerd fan, then chances are you already bought this, and as such, why the fuck are you even watching this in the first place? But even if you're not familiar with the Angry Video Game Nerd series, or you just don't care for it, that shouldn't prevent you from giving Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures a fair shake. It's a nice little slice of retro gaming platforming that harkens back to the days of brutal side-scrolling action games, and it does a fairly good job of it as well. It can get difficult to the point of being frustrating beyond reason, but it won't make you curse out vulgarities or drink a shit beer to ease the pain or anything of the sort. And after a few tries, you'll eventually conquer the challenge, and maybe try the harder difficulty settings that you can unlock if you care for that sort of thing. So there's quite a bit to do regardless. In any case, the fans of the nerd have already bought this, and if you haven't, you're probably not a fan. But again, if you're not a fan of the character but enjoy a nice, challenging slice of old-school side-scrolling platforming fun, then this game should provide plenty of that in spades. And even if you are a detractor of the nerd and the franchise and whatever, I still say get this game. Because if nothing else, you get to kill the nerd as many times as possible and in many brutal fashions to your heart's content. I guess in a way you could say that Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures is truly the perfect game for both fanboys and detractors and haters alike. And anyone else in between as well.